And what I saw, I wouldn't want any parent to go through. I could look in the room. There's writing all over the wall. I kind of just was in shock for the whole day. I knew something was wrong. That's not my daughter. She would call me all the time, talk about, Daddy, I'm checking on you. And I'd be like, no, I'm checking on you. You know, that was our little joke. And I knew something was wrong as soon as I got there.
Yeah, that was our baby. And as many people in Houston knew her and loved her, she was as sweet with them as she is with us. She took care of people. She's just a sweetheart. And my baby's gone from a tragic event that didn't have to happen. Being strangled to death is a horrible way to die. And my baby's gone. And it was horrible to even think about it.
In August 2021, authorities in Richmond, Texas, discovered the body of 33-year-old Janae Gagnier, known online as Miss Mercedes Moore, inside her apartment. A second body, later identified as 34-year-old Kevin Alexander Accordo, was also found at the scene. The investigation determined that Gagnier had died from strangulation and traumatic concussion, while Accordo's death was ruled a suicide from multiple sharp force injuries. Writings were located on the walls of the residence, suggesting fixation and distress, though the full content was not publicly released. Law enforcement stated there was no evidence of a prior relationship between the two.
The family says they hadn't heard from her for a couple days, so they showed up here to the apartment complex. When no one answered when the dad knocked, he kicked the door in and said he found his daughter there on the floor, already deceased, and her killer upstairs with a knife in him, still alive. To her parents and other family and friends, 33-year-old Janae Gagnier was so much more than an Instagram model.
She was special. Just like she had a few million followers, that's all fine and good. But she was a person, and we miss her a lot.
Searching us out to get the facts. Janae was loved, funny, goofy, crazy as hell. I know, and I shouldn't say that about my daughter, but that's my daughter.
The case was classified as a murder-suicide, closing formal proceedings but leaving several questions unresolved. How Accordo located Gagnier, the extent of any prior contact, and whether preventive measures could have changed the outcome remain unclear. The incident raised wider discussions about online visibility, safety, and the risks of public exposure. Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Janae Lynn Gagnier, known online as Miss Mercedes Moore, was born on November 25, 1987, in Texas. She was the daughter of Mark Gagnier and Jeanetta Grover. She grew up in the Houston area alongside her siblings, where she spent most of her childhood and young adult years. Family members described her as dependable and protective, taking on the role of a caring older sister. Her upbringing in Texas remained largely private, with limited public details about her early schooling or hobbies outside of her later professional career. Her life before social media was centered around family and her local community, but her image would eventually grow far beyond her hometown. Janae began her professional pursuits in modeling at the local level. She transitioned from smaller modeling opportunities to building a brand through social media. Under the name Miss Mercedes Moore, she crafted a recognizable persona that resonated with millions of followers. Her primary platform was Instagram, where she attracted more than 2.6 million followers by 2021. Her content featured modeling photography, fashion, and lifestyle promotion. She collaborated with clothing brands, including Fashion Nova, a company that partnered with many online influencers for brand exposure. In addition to Instagram, she maintained a presence on Snapchat and used subscription-based platforms, such as OnlyFans, expanding her reach and diversify her online presence. Through these channels, she built a career that was both profitable and highly visible, placing her in the public eye and giving her recognition across social media communities. Publicly, Miss Mercedes Moore cultivated a glamorous persona. Her Instagram feed reflected luxury, fashion, and style. To millions of viewers, She represented the aspirational lifestyle associated with influencers who built careers through beauty, branding, and social platforms. Privately, her family described her as reserved, responsible, and loyal. She was seen as a protective sister and dependable daughter. The duality of her life was clear. The online figure with millions of followers contrasted with the private person who valued her close family ties. Her family expressed concerns about her safety as her fame grew. They warned her about the risks of obsessive followers and the possibility that strangers might attempt to cross digital boundaries. The attention Jenna received online was not limited to admiration. Her father, Mark Gagnier, publicly shared that he had been uneasy about her online presence, citing the potential for unwanted attention. Rumors circulated that she was being stalked or followed, though no official reports confirm a specific stalker before her death. Across the United States, fans and followers took obsessive interest in her life, sometimes blurring the line between spectator and pursuer. This risk, well known among public figures, would later become a critical detail when her case unfolded. In the final week of August 2021, Jenna's communication with family members became irregular. Calls and messages went unanswered. Family members who were accustomed to hearing from her regularly began to notice the silence. As days passed without a response, concern grew. By the end of August, it became unusual enough that her parents started to question her well-being. On August 29th, 2021, Jenna's parents were deeply concerned after continued attempts to reach her failed. Her father, Mark Gagnier, decided to personally check on her at her apartment in Richmond, Texas. This decision would lead to the discovery of the crime. The apartment complex where Jenna lived was known as the Cortland Apartments, located in Richmond, Fort Bend County, Texas. It was a gated community with controlled access, designed to provide security and privacy for residents. When her father arrived and received no response, he forced entry into the unit. Inside, he encountered a scene that would later be confirmed as a murder-suicide. At the bottom of the staircase inside the apartment, he discovered the body of his daughter, Jenna Gagnier. Her death would later be ruled a homicide caused by strangulation and traumatic concussion. Upstairs in the apartment, a second body was discovered. The man was later identified as Kevin Alexander Accordo, a 34-year-old resident of Florida. He was found with knife wounds, including a fatal self-inflicted injury. His death was officially ruled a suicide caused by multiple sharp force trauma. Investigators noted writings on the walls of the apartment, which contained erratic messages, including apologies and declarations of love. These writings, along with the physical evidence, suggested an unstable mental state and an obsessive fixation on the victim. The discovery confirmed that the case was not an accident, but a homicide-suicide involving a suspect with no confirmed personal relationship to the victim. On August 29, 2021, Richmond, Texas authorities were dispatched to an apartment at the Cortland complex after family members requested a welfare check. Inside, two bodies were discovered. One belonged to Jenna Lynn Gagnier, better known by her social media name Miss Mercedes Moore, and the other was identified as Kevin Alexander Accordo, a 34-year-old man from Florida. The findings at the scene raised immediate questions about access, motive, and the circumstances that led to the confrontation. The location of the crime was the Cortland Apartments, a gated community in Richmond, Texas. The complex was designed with security features, such as controlled entry points and gated access. Residents generally relied on electronic codes or key card for entry, and the surrounding area was considered quiet and residential. Investigators noted there were no signs of forced entry into Gagnier's unit. No broken locks, no damaged doors, and no visible tamper with windows were reported. This suggested that whoever entered had either been granted access or had found another method to bypass the controlled entry of the complex. The absence of forced entry became one of the central unanswered questions. How had a man from Florida, with no known ties to the area, gained entry into a secure Texas apartment? The condition of the unit was otherwise typical, with no evidence of burglary or items taken. The focus remained on the violent outcome and the cryptic writings discovered inside. Inside the apartment, Jenna Lynn Gagnier's body was located at the bottom of a staircase. Initial observations indicated trauma, but further confirmation came from the medical examiner. Her official cause of death was homicide by strangulation and traumatic concussion. The positioning of her body suggested a struggle had occurred before her death. Investigators considered the possibility that she had been attacked on the stairs, potentially losing consciousness from blunt trauma before the final act of strangulation. No weapons were tied to her injuries, meaning the suspect used physical force rather than external objects. The medical examiner's conclusion of strangulation classified the death as deliberate homicide rather than accidental. This finding eliminated the possibility of a mutual altercation or accident and firmly placed responsibility on the second body found in the apartment. Upstairs, a second body was discovered. It belonged to Kevin Alexander Cordo, age 34, of Florida. His death was ruled a suicide. The cause was listed as multiple sharp force trauma, specifically self-inflicted stab wounds. A knife was still lodged in his neck when authorities arrived. Other wounds were present, consistent with repeated attempts to take his own life. The scene indicated he had inflicted the injuries himself while inside the apartment after Gagnier's death. The separation of the two bodies, Gagnier at the bottom of the staircase and Accordo upstairs, suggested the timeline of events involved her homicide first, followed by a suicide. The most notable element discovered inside the apartment was a presence of writings scrawled on walls. These writings contained apologies, declarations of love, and incoherent phrases. Investigators noted they appeared rushed and erratic, covering multiple areas inside the unit. The messages suggested a disturbed state of mind. Some statements appeared to reference Gagnier directly, while others reflected despair or hopelessness. Combined with the method of suicide, the writings pointed to emotional instability and obsession on the part of Accordo. Authorities did not disclose the exact wording of all the writings to the public, but their general content aligned with behavior often associated with stalkers or individuals suffering from fixation disorders. The man was identified as Kevin Alexander Accordo, born in 1987 and residing in Florida. Public records showed no criminal history involving violent behavior. He was not previously documented in connection to serious crimes, nor did he have known ties to Texas. This lack of background raised questions about what led to his sudden appearance at the home of a high-profile social media figure hundreds of miles from his residence. Authorities confirmed that there was no evidence of a personal relationship between Gagnier and Accordo. Family members also supported this conclusion, stating that she did not know him. Police investigations into phone records, digital communications, and mutual contacts found no clear indication of prior contact. It is believed Accordo was a follower or online observer, part of the large audience that consumed Gagnier's content across social media platforms. Unlike other cases where stalkers make repeated threats or attempts at direct communication, there is little public evidence of such interaction in this case. The exact details of how Accordo traveled from Florida to Richmond, Texas remain unclear. Investigators determined that his presence was deliberate rather than coincidental, suggesting planning and intent. Questions remain about the logistics of his journey, whether he traveled by car or plane, whether he stayed in the area before approaching the apartment, and how he managed to access a secured gated complex. No signs of forced entry into the apartment itself made this point even more central. Without surveillance footage or eyewitness testimony released publicly, the means by which he gained entry remains an unresolved detail of the case. The writings on the walls, paired with a violent method of suicide, painted a picture of severe emotional turmoil. Investigators interpreted the notes as signs of obsession, despair, and instability. The combination of a planned journey, targeted victim, and erratic writings pointed fixation on Gagnier, likely developed through observing her online presence. This fixation appeared to have escalated into an act of violence, followed by self-destruction. The medical examiner confirmed that his cause of death was suicide by multiple sharp force trauma, closing the question of whether a third party might have been involved in the incident. The case of Jenny Lynn Gagnier, better known as Miss Mercedes Moore, raised national attention, not only because of her social media presence, but also because of the unusual and violent way in which her life ended. The following account examines the autopsy findings, the investigative questions that remain, and the testimonies provided by her family. The medical examiner's report provided clear answers about the causes of death for both individuals found inside the apartment on August 29, 2021. The autopsy determined that the cause of death was homicide. She died by strangulation and traumatic concussion. The combination of injuries confirmed that her death was caused intentionally by another person. No medical findings suggested an accidental cause or self-inflicted harm. The autopsy concluded that his cause of death was suicide. He died from multiple sharp force injuries, described as self-inflicted stab wounds. The official ruling stated there was no indication of a third party's involvement in his death. The findings supported the conclusion that the incident was a murder-suicide. Despite the autopsy reports, significant investigative questions remain unresolved. These questions relate to access, timing, digital behavior, and the suspect's state of mind. The first question concerns how Kevin Accordo entered the gated apartment complex and accessed Gagnier's residence. The Cortland apartments were described as secured with controlled entry points. Investigators found no evidence of forced entry into Gagnier's apartment. This raises a possibility that the suspect either followed another vehicle inside the complex or gained entry by some other means. It is also unclear whether the apartment door had been unlocked, whether a key was used, or if entry occurred through a secondary access point. Determining the method of entry is critical for understanding whether the suspect planned his approach in advance or acted opportunistically. The second question involves establishing the exact timeline. Gagnier's family attempted to contact her during the weekend but did not receive responses. By Sunday afternoon, her father visited the apartment to check on her welfare and forced entry after no one answered the door. Investigators must determine when the confrontation occurred between Gagnier and Accordo. The medical examiner's report indicated strangulation and concussion, but the time of death relative to discovery has not been publicly specified. Establishing how long Gagnier had been deceased before her father entered the home is key to understanding how long the suspect remained inside the residence afterward. The third investigative question concerns the suspect's digital behavior. Authorities confirmed that Gagnier and Accordo did not have a known personal relationship. The main connection appears to be that he followed her online. It is unclear whether Accordo left behind any communications, messages, or threats directed toward Gagnier before the incident. Investigators would need to examine phone records, direct messages, and other forms of contact to determine if he had attempted communication. Understanding whether he tracked her movements or location through digital means could explain how he located her residence. The final investigative area concerns the mental state of Kevin Accordo and his motive. Writings were discovered on the walls of the apartment, described as expressions of love, apologies, and erratic statements. These writings raise questions about whether his actions were premeditated or the result of delusion and obsession. Investigators have not disclosed whether Accordo had a history of mental illness or prior incidents of stalking behavior. The motive has not been officially established, leaving open whether this was a planned act driven by fixation or a spontaneous breakdown. The testimony of Gagnier's family members provided further detail about the discovery of the crime and their perspective on the case. Her father, Mark Gagnier, was the person who discovered the bodies. He had grown concerned after being unable to reach his daughter. When he arrived at her residence, he forced entry into the apartment. Inside, he found his daughter's body at the bottom of the staircase. He also observed the writings on the walls, described as confessions and ramblings. According to him, his daughter did not know the suspect and had no prior connection with him. His testimony supported the official statement by police that no relationship existed between the victim and the suspect. Her mother, Jeanetta Grover, also spoke publicly about the loss. She emphasized that while her daughter was famous online, to her family she was simply loved as a daughter. She rejected the rumors that circulated after the incident, which speculated about causes of death unrelated to the facts. Her statement, famous in her world, love in ours, summarized the difference between her daughter's public image and private life. Other family members also responded to the case. Her sister and close relatives publicly defended her legacy, disputing misinformation about her life and the circumstances of her death. They confirmed that she had no known relationship with the suspect. They addressed the impact of false speculation and rumors that quickly spread online after the news broke. Their testimonies reinforced the picture of a violent act committed by an obsessed stranger rather than someone with a personal connection. When the bodies of Jenna Gagnier, known online as Miss Mercedes Moore, and Kevin Alexander Accordo were discovered in Richmond, Texas, the news quickly spread beyond the local community. Gagnier was not just another homicide victim. With more than 2 million followers on Instagram and a public persona as a model and influencer, her death immediately attracted nationwide attention. What might have remained a local crime scene instead became a headline story across media outlets, sparking speculation, misinformation, and larger debates about the risks of online fame. The discovery of Gagnier's death was first reported locally in Texas, but the scale of her online following ensured that the story did not remain regional. Within hours, major news outlets including News, ABC, NBC, and CNN published articles confirming the identity of the victim as Miss Mercedes Moore. These reports highlighted the unusual nature of the case. A popular influencer found dead in her own home, alongside a man with no known ties to her. The framing of the story focused heavily on her social media career. Headlines describe her as an Instagram model or social media star, linking her public identity directly to the incident. The emphasis on her fame gave the case wide circulation in entertainment and lifestyle publications, as well as true crime segments in mainstream outlets. Her death was covered not only in traditional news, but also in blogs, gossip sites, and international press. The unusual murder-suicide format added to the coverage. Unlike many cases where the suspect flees or remains unidentified, Accordo was found dead at the scene. The combination of a high-profile victim, a mysterious suspect, and immediate police conclusions made the story both straightforward in some respects and full of unanswered questions in others. On social platforms, news of her death spread rapidly. Fans, followers, and fellow influencers expressed shock at the initial reports. Many who followed her for years posted screenshots of her last social media activity, speculating on whether she had left any signs or warnings. Almost immediately, misinformation began to circulate. False stories claimed she had died of natural causes, drug use, or other unrelated circumstances. Some posts suggested she had contracted diseases or that her death was linked to the COVID-19 pandemic. These unverified claims spread quickly, forcing her family to publicly clarify the truth about her murder. Conspiracy theories also developed around the case. Online users speculated about whether she and Accordo had a hidden relationship, despite authorities stating that no such evidence existed. Others questioned whether the suspect had been hired or influenced by third parties. The lack of publicly released details from law enforcement allowed rumors to flourish unchecked. For influencers and content creators with similar public profiles, the case struck a specific nerve. Many shared posts about feeling unsafe or receiving obsessive attention from followers. Her death became a talking point in discussions about how easily someone's online popularity could attract unwanted and sometimes dangerous attention. Beyond immediate media reports and online speculation, the case triggered broader debates. One key conversation centered on influencer safety. Many asked what protections public figures have when they live alone and broadcast details of their lives online. The gated complex where Gagnier lived was assumed to provide security, yet the suspect managed to gain access without signs of forced entry. Another area of discussion focused on the risks of fame in digital spaces. The case highlighted how internet visibility can blur the line between personal and public life. Followers may feel a false sense of intimacy with influencers, interpreting content as a form of personal connection. For unstable individuals, this parasocial attachment can escalate into obsession. Advocates for online safety use the case as an example of why influencers should take precautions with home addresses, posting habits, and security measures. It also raised questions about what responsibility social media platforms have in identifying or intervening when followers exhibit threatening behavior. Following autopsies and investigations, the Fort Bend County Medical Examiner's Office ruled that Jenna Gagnier's cause of death was homicide by strangulation and traumatic concussion. Kevin Alexander Accordo's cause of death was ruled suicide due to multiple sharp force injuries. Police officially classified the incident as a murder-suicide. Authorities confirmed there was no known prior relationship between the victim and the suspect. Their conclusion was that Accordo had developed an obsession with Gagnier online and eventually traveled from Florida to Texas to confront her. With the suspect deceased, law enforcement had no opportunity to pursue prosecution. The murder-suicide ruling effectively closed the case. However, this closure left many gaps in understanding. Without direct testimony or trial evidence, questions about motive, planning, and the exact timeline of events remain unanswered. The case therefore sits in a unique position, technically resolved, yet still incomplete in the details that would normally emerge through further investigation or court proceedings. In Richmond, Texas, the crime shook residents who were unaccustomed to national attention. The gated complex where the incident occurred faced scrutiny over its security procedures, as many questioned how a non-resident was able to enter. Among the influencer community, the case became a cautionary example. Discussions about protecting personal privacy, limiting geotagging, and increasing physical security gained momentum. Workshops, podcasts, and social media discussions used her case to highlight the dangers of oversharing personal information online. For her followers and fans, her death served as a reminder that internet fame carries risks beyond public criticism. It exposed a darker side of visibility, where admiration can turn into obsession and access to a public persona can create opportunities for predators. Despite the official ruling, multiple questions remain unresolved. Reports confirm no forced entry. This raises uncertainty about whether Accordo followed her, manipulated security systems, or found another means to enter her apartment complex. Police and family confirmed that messages were left on the walls. They included apologies and statements of love, but not all content has been disclosed. Without full context, it is unclear whether they point to motive or mental instability. Officials stated there was no evidence of a personal relationship. However, digital communications such as direct messages or emails could exist but remain undisclosed to the public. The case raises questions about how much responsibility lies with law enforcement, platforms, or the individuals themselves in recognizing and mitigating threats. The broader question remains unresolved. With influencer culture continuing to grow, there is no clear framework for protecting those whose public visibility makes them potential targets for obsession. The case of Miss Mercedes Moore ended in a murder-suicide officially closed by law enforcement, but far from resolved in the minds of the public. Media coverage emphasized her fame, social media amplified misinformation, and larger conversations focused on safety and the risks of digital visibility. With unanswered questions still lingering, the case remains a reference point in discussions of online fame, obsession, and the vulnerabilities of public figures. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.